around New York City, and then eventually, and unfortunately, he pushed a woman named Kendra Webdale onto the subway tracks in New York City. And, you know, it's a horrible story. My heart goes out to the Webdales, you know, and I have spoken to people, advocates of mental illness who are familiar with Kendra's law and so forth, and I have spoken to them about trying to take this incident and Dateline and help the Webdales. And again, you know, their response to it is kind of like my response to you, you know. It sounds like a good thing in theory, but you're going to go 2-3 steps down the road and you're going to find somebody who maybe you don't want to mess with. Discredited. And, you know, it's a difficult answer. And honestly, you know, from what I've discovered, that's their worst fear. Yeah. Their worst fear is that somebody like John F. Kennedy or Martin Luther King or Tupac Shakur or Kurt Cobain or Biggie Smalls can get up and stand on a microphone and have 50,000 people going bananas. It's probably one of the government's biggest fears. Yeah, something I've learned, and some of the other stuff that we've talked about in terms of mind control, it does, go back to things that they tried with Fidel Castro, trying to overthrow him in Cuba. I know one of the more well-known things regarding that is that they had a master plan to make his beard fall out, to have him speak in front of an audience and have his beard fall off his face. I think that's at the heart of the matter, to tell you the truth. So being practical about the whole thing, you know, I have no interest in politics, to tell you the truth. It's a tough answer. You know, if you want to keep going in the direction we're going, it's a tough answer. I don't even recognize the New York City that I walk into. You know, I grew up in the 80s. I thought Ronald Reagan was a good president. There was stuff that happened during his presidency that I said, this is going to, you know, catch up with me later on. It's not going to catch up with him later on. It's going to catch up with people my age. And it did. And Iran-Contra. I had to take one step out of my doorstep to see what Iran-Contra, you know, left in America and the effect that it had in America. And, you know, the white Jordache wearing people got cocaine, and the inner cities got crack. So unfortunately, you know, that is how they do it for me at this point, really, because growing up, I admired the New York Islanders. I still love hockey to this day. Hockey's on NBC and Chris Hansen is not, for a reason, and it has everything to do with the games in New York between the Islanders and Rangers, and the Rangers winning the Stanley Cup in 1994, and how that has become folklore. And ESPN has made a 30 for 30 documentary called June 17th, 1994, about what they consider the most incredible day in sports history. The director of that film, his name is Brett Morgan. He's from Staten Island, New York. He also made a film about Kurt Cobain. And both of those films of his I happened to see, and it was refreshing because the guy had it exactly right in both films. Yeah, and then, you know, the OJ thing. My father was a New York City taxi driver, and because, you know, whatever his reasoning was, he would walk in the door every night and he would call me Chips, like the TV show on at the time. And my father drove a limousine-style taxi cab, and the reason I just mentioned the show Taxi with Andy Kaufman, who I love, was because of the style of cab. So it's just recently I'm waking up, you know, it was a limousine style of cab, and those are gone in New York City now. And my father had one of the last, like, 3 or 4 of them, to the best of my knowledge. But, you know, I woke up and said to myself, gee, am I alive because of this damn Kennedy limo and so forth? You know, cynical way of thinking of stuff, but I almost started to think back. You know, I could see my dad going to his mother and say, oh, well, what should I do? You know, my 2 older brothers did this, and you know, my grandmother kind of cynically, you know, why don't you drive a cab, you know, because you could probably do a much better job than the guy who was driving the Kennedy limousine. So, unfortunately, from what I've learned, a lot of the stuff we're talking about does go back to that. And Manson family thing, I happen to think it was fake. There's things online where you could see that indeed it was, and in comparison to the O.J. Simpson trial, it's actually harder to discover the the fakeness of the Manson than it is of the OJ. It's actually a little easier to figure out as fake. Yeah, that's what '94 was like. I mean, if I've thought that to myself, that the O.J. Simpson case was the Manson case of the 90s. And that's what made 94 what it was, is that it was just bang, bang, bang. And then the night the Knicks lost to the Houston Rockets in the NBA Finals, and for my lifetime and my background and so forth, that was really the day New York died. Yeah. Because I've thought about it, and I have thought about it. If Sports Illustrated has on one side of their cover Mark Messier with the Stanley Cup, and on the other side of the cover is Patrick Ewing with the NBA championship, and it's New York City, that is a dangerous image for the United States of America. It's not something I want to set out to do. For me to survive, I just accepted that I'm going to let the world be the world, and I got to survive, and it may not be the right thing to go out and, take on the establishment. I think you can do it, in a fun way, making fun of somebody like Hansen or talking about how lame, unbelievably lame, Saturday Night Live has become. To poke fun at stuff like that, I think is fine. If you want to be John Lennon or you want to be Martin Luther King, you have to realize you're taking a chance because you are coming about it in that serious manner. And again, it's the difference between, here's George Carlin, who's anti-establishment, and here's the Kennedys or some of the other 60 figures who later on got assassinated. Mm-hmm. George Carlin's audience is dying laughing. JFK's audience is saying, oh my God, this is going to change the whole face of the earth.
Right.
So that's the difference. If you can make people laugh about it, it's the same way to defuse a bully. If you can make, all his lieutenants and all the other people die laughing right off the spot, he's going to lose his intimidative powers. It's tough, I've searched for my answers the best that I can. I came to my, moment of, I don't want to say truth, but I got my closure, let's say. I came to closure, at least in terms of who I am, why I'm here, why things happen the way that they did. So if so-and-so wants to call me this, whatever, they can do it. If they want to think this, they can do it. You can think whatever you want to think. You can say whatever you want to say. When you start, interjecting yourself physically into somebody's personal space or their private space, now it's a different story because we all have a right to our person, to not have our person intruded. To single somebody out and say, okay, we're going to start here on Monday and we're going to do this. We're going to give them their first sip of beer. And then on Wednesday, we're going to offer them another beer, except this time it's going to be a six-pack. And then so forth. Friday, we're going to bring cigarettes into the picture, so forth and so on. And then it's 2 weeks later now. And now, here's Chris Hansen showing you an alcoholic who smokes 3 packs a day. So that's how they do it.